What is going on, YouTube? This is Lamont at Large coming to you from Springfield, Missouri, and a rather nice, lovely neighborhood in Springfield, Missouri. A lot of these houses that I'm walking by right now, very nice, very expensive, possibly $750,000 these houses would go for, and some even more. A very quiet and safe neighborhood, but not all is what it appears to be. This neighborhood is also the site of a very unusual crime, a crime that has almost haunted this city going on almost 30 years now. This is a crime that has been talked about by many people, podcast, YouTube, Dateline NBC. If you want more information about the case, you simply only need to look online and use whatever search engine you prefer. But this neighborhood is the site of the disappearance that is commonly referred to as the Springfield 3. The Springfield 3 involves the disappearance of 19-year-old Susan Streeter, her mother, 47-year-old Cheryl LaVitt, and Susan's friend, Stacy McCall. They simply vanished. And on June 7th, 1992, that was the last date that Susan and her friend Stacy were seen. They had attended that night, June 6th, 1992, they attended a series of graduation parties around the area. And they were last seen at one of the parties at around 2 a.m. on June 7th, 1992. So at the time during the parties, Susan and Stacy were supposed to go to their friend's house to spend the night because the next day they were all supposed to go to a water park. Their friend's name was Janelle Kirby. So they showed up to Janelle Kirby's house and they realized just from the outside that there was a big party going on. It was way too crowded and they were tired. They didn't feel like dealing with a bunch of loud music, loud noises, so forth and so on. So they just decided to go home. So they went back to Susan's mom's house, Cheryl. That's where they both lived. And a friend that has spoken with Cheryl over the phone, the last time anybody heard from Cheryl was around 11:15 p.m. on the night of June 6th. So nobody seen or heard from anybody in the morning. Janelle, who was the person that Susan and Stacy were supposed to spend the night at their house, she was wondering where they were. They were supposed to go to the water park. So she went over to Susan's house, knocked on the door, and nobody answered. And they had noticed that on the front porch there was a broken porch light and there was glass all over. They walked into the house and they noticed that their dog, their family dog, it was like a little small Yorkshire Terrier named Cinnamon, came running up to them like very distressed, barking up a storm, whimpering and all this and that. They looked around and they noticed that all the women's purses were there and just something wasn't right. Their cars were there, their purses were there, all their effects were there. So they quickly left to go call the police. And as they left, Stacy McCall's mother, Janice, came through to the scene because she was wondering where her daughter was. Her daughter hadn't called her and she was a little bit worried. So she went to the house. She noticed again the door was unlocked and she went in there and again noticed the same scene. Noticed that all the women's purses were there, the cars were there. And one thing that struck Janice, because she was pretty good friends with Cheryl, was that Cheryl was a chain smoker and yet her cigarettes were there. Cheryl was a type that she just smoked. That was her thing. She would not leave anywhere without her cigarettes, and Janice was very adamant about that. So finally, the police were called. They came to investigate the scene. And other than the broken porch light, which was cleaned up by Janelle's boyfriend, he wanted to clean up a mess. He was trying to be nice, but in so trying to be nice, he contaminated the scene. And by the time police and detectives got there, they estimated that at least 20 people had contaminated the crime scene. And there really wasn't much of any evidence at all of any kind of a struggle or break-in. The only evidence that something occurred at the house was that broken porch light that was inadvertently cleaned up by Janelle's boyfriend. Coincidentally enough, while Janelle was there, she had received 2 prank calls because the phone rang. She was thinking maybe it was them. She picked up the phone, and on the other line, there was a male voice that was saying some rather sexually crude things to her. He called twice. She hung up twice. After she left, when Janice arrived there, she received the same call, hung up, and the same caller left a voicemail, which was accidentally erased. So you got a lot of evidence of that the detectives could have collected, and yet people are inadvertently contaminating it. And so that's roughly it right there in a nutshell. You have 3 women who disappeared out of thin air. Absolutely no evidence that they had any kind of enemies. They've never received any threats that anybody was aware of. Nobody knows what happened. It's just one of the weirdest cases ever. Now, I do want to say in around 1997, a man by the name of Robert Craig Cox, who is currently serving time in a Texas prison for kidnap and robbery, and was also wanted or suspected of a murder that occurred in Florida, claimed to a newspaper reporter while in jail that he knew what happened to the women and their bodies would never, ever be found. And he was very confident about that. Now, a lot of detectives, they theorized that maybe he just is saying this just for, just to get attention. But it was a fact that Robert did live in the Springfield area at that time, and he had a girlfriend in the area. But the girlfriend also claims that he coached her into saying certain things. So who knows if we could take his word for it. And then in 2007, a crime reporter by the name of Katherine Beard, invited a man who owned a machine that pretty much it's like a ground penetrating radar machine. It goes into the ground and can produce images of whatever things might be buried. A psychic had contacted Miss Beard and had claimed that the 3 bodies would possibly be buried under the south parking garage of the Cox Hospital here in Springfield. Now, he did bring his machine, and they did go into the ground, over the ground, and 3 anomalies did come up on his sonar, which would be consistent with what you would find at a gravesite. Now, of course, here's the problem. You have a multi-million-dollar parking structure built up on top of the ground right there. What are you going to do? Knock this parking structure over and then dig in hopes of finding anything and then rebuild it? Not my words, simply theirs. This case has haunted Springfield, Missouri for almost 30 years now. Nobody knows what happened to these 3 women. Absolutely no forensic evidence at the scene of the crime. And as you look into the center of your screen, the scene of the crime is right across the street in front of you. This is the 1700 block of East Delmar. And where you'll see that big tire, that is the house where the crime occurred, where the women disappeared. That is where they lived, right there. And who knows what happened to them? Very odd that 3 women just totally disappear. It's very hard to just kidnap 3 women where nobody heard them scream. You can only imagine that even though this house is on the cusp of a business area, there's a busy street right there, Glenstone. You can only imagine that if they were screaming, that neighbors would have heard it. They would have woke up. They would have called the police. Yet nobody seen anything. Nobody heard anything. It's like they simply walked off the planet. In 1997, Susan and her mother were declared legally dead. But as of right now, this is still considered a missing persons case. It all happened at that house right there. If anybody has any information on the disappearance of Susan Streeter, her mother Cheryl LaVitt, or her friend Stacy McCall, go ahead and give the Springfield, Missouri Police Department a call at 417-864-1810. I am Lamont at large. Thank you for watching. Peace out.